We have Nobuko Miyairi from ORCID. She's the Regional Director, Asia Pacific for ORCID, that's ORCID, based in Tokyo. She wants us to ask ourselves, is your name unique enough to identify you? We're not talking identity theft, but if you've published under different names in different languages or different institutions, you could face a struggle to collect all the work that belongs to you. ORCID is an open scholarly initiative to help connect all your work to a unique 16-digit number. So it's like your My number or your social security number, but for science. In this talk, Nobuko will introduce how ORCID is increasingly used in publishing, research, funding, academic profiling, and broadly in the open science environment. Welcome, Nobuko.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, and I'd like to start with the music. No. My husband, non-SMAP husband, singing a SMAP song. That's what it is. Okay. Right. So I'm going to talk about the only flower you can get in the world. That's orchid. Orchid, as in orchid or CHID, it's a flower. But tonight I'm talking about orchid without H, and that's a short for Open Researcher and Contributor ID. I'd like to see hands. How many people heard about ORCID? Oops, sorry, I tripped over. Yes, great, thank you. But I actually, it's a lot. I actually expected and prepared to speak from scratch, so please don't worry even if you don't know about ORCID. Okay. So ORCID is a digital identifier that you can get for yourself. Sorry, this is actually tulips and not orchid. Because I couldn't find a picture of a bunch of orchids, so I just used tulip. But as this yellow tulip, you can identify yourself and differentiate from other people, and that's what you do with ORCID. And this is actually my ORCID number. It looks like 16-digit credit card number, but this is the number that uniquely identifies you. And it says Open Researcher and Contributor ID. So it's not only just for researchers, but also any contributors in scholarly communication. But to simplify, I'll just say researcher, author, depending on what I'm talking about. But it can be anyone contributing to scholarly communication. So, question, have you got any doppelganger for yourself? Anyone met or found anyone else having the exact same name with yours? Anyone? Oh, that's great. You know what? You're going to get the ORCID bag. My colleague Jason is going to give you an ORCID bag. Jason, come up. Thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah, there you go. That one in the middle. All right, yeah, there you go, Jason. Yeah. All right, great, thank you. Yeah, I think I saw another one around there. Did we? Okay, probably no. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna just ask random questions during my presentation. Okay, so you could actually see some very funny stories on the internet. But before that, anyone from Korea? Kim, Lee, Park are very popular common names in South Korea. And can you guess how much of the country's population these three surnames account for? Any guess? No.
5, 9, 4, 9, 4, 9.
No.
9.
Who said 50? Okay, yeah, you are close. Yeah, okay, you get the bag. All right, Jensen, the gentleman in the front. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. All right, so this is how it looks like. Okay, Kim Lee Park actually accounts for 45% of Korean population. And adding two more names, Choi and Chun, they go over 50%. So if I talk like this in Korea and ask people to raise their hand if your name is Kim or Lee or Park, and then like half of the room would raise their hand. That's how it is like. So names are not unique, you know. So to identify people uniquely, so that is the problem that we always encounter, right? And here's a fascinating story written by Scott Shane and Scott Shane. The title, yeah, the title is Me and My Doppelganger. And this is written by business school professor Scott Shane and Scott Shane, the journalist, together. Yeah, so this is really great article you should pick up, and here is the URL you can pick up. Okay, and my name, Miyairi, last name, is actually my husband's last name. I am married to him. I used my husband's last name. And I thought Miyairi, if you lived long enough in Japan, you can recognize it's actually a rare name, right? But so I never expected my husband would have a doppelganger, and he does. This is my husband, the one singing the song in the beginning. So he's a musician, sociologist, and lecturer. Yeah. And on the right-hand side, you can also find Kyohei Miyairi, the exact same name, graduate student of the University of Tokyo. Yeah, and I just contacted him. Wow, you have my husband's name. Can I use your picture? And he kindly agreed. So the problem here is that Chinese characters we use, to write our Japanese names, and they are actually distinctly different. But transliterating into alphabet is the problem. It can end up like Kyohei Miyairi, exact the same name, and that's another challenge for Asian names, right? Yeah. And there's another fascinating story on the internet. They are both, same name, and she was always getting the parking ticket of somebody else, and she insisted that it is not hers, hers, and she rejected, but she just couldn't control it. And it turned out the lady on the left-hand side was the one who should have paid the fine. Right. So finally, she tracked down the other lady, and they became friends. Actually, it's a nice story too. Another problem is that even if you try to control, some authorities would not recognize the differences. Therefore, they mix up your records, and you mistakenly get someone else's mail, for example, or sometimes fines and so on. So that's also a problem, right? Another problem, you're always asked who you are and what to do. Yeah, and especially if you work in academia, that is a problem. Your funding organization, for example, or promotion committee of your university or the research institution, they always ask you, okay, remind us again who you are and what you do. And what are the list of publications you published in the past 10 years? Yeah, just give us those examples and update, so on. So you are constantly, updating your CV, resume, and all those dossier, and you end up like this. You are, buried with papers and records of yourself and trying to update and keep up, and it is very time consuming. If you know a researcher, you know what I'm talking about, right? Another problem, it's usually someone else searching for you. It's actually not a problem for yourself to understand, identify yourself, and also understand what you have done in the past years. But if somebody else is trying to find you, the real Sofia Garcia stand-up, yes, I am the Sofia Garcia, but if people are searching like on the internet, how can you control, them find you correctly, Yeah. So again, transliteration problem. Sofia Garcia could be like, this. Yeah. So transliteration can introduce another layer of problem. So names are really messy information unless you do something about it. If you try to control your records and try to manage it, it's really just time consuming. And there are so many services, that ask for you to update. And once you create an account, you just need to keep up, and you are soon, surrounded by many profiles of yours that you long have not updated. In fact, 2 years ago, I changed my job, to my current position. I did not know, where to start because by then I had so many profiles and, some of them were really outdated until very recently because I simply forgot to update, right? Okay, so solution, get an ORCID ID. It's not the end of the story. Yes, I put the ORCID ID icon in the center. Yeah. So how to get it and what it does for you. ORCID is a researcher control, open, persistent, and community-driven initiative. Yeah. Somebody before this started, tonight started, asked me, I'm from this company. We are not actually a company. We are a non-profit international organization, and we are very, very startup. There are only 27 of us in the world, and I am one of the 3 people sitting in Asia Pacific meaning from New Zealand to as far as India and Pakistan. So I need to cover an awful lot of places, to go around and do this kind of talk. Right, which is fun. Okay, so this is who we are. As an organization, we started back in 2010, and the service started in 2012. So, after the service has started, it's only 5 years now, and we are rapidly growing. We are non-profit, non-proprietary, and very open organization. We are global and interdisciplinary, independent and community-driven. How we support ourselves, we still need to make the operational cost, and we rely on fundings from the Sloan Foundation, Helmsley Charity in the US, and some other organizations. But essentially, we are member-driven organizations. We ask for research organizations, universities to join us as a member and support us financially. So that's how we operate. Okay. When we say persistent, well, ORCID is one of the persistent identifiers. This is the definition of persistent identifier I took from Wikipedia. And persistent identifier is usually used in the context of digital object and usually accessible over the internet. And it's not only just persistent, but something actionable because it is digital, right? So I'd like to give you an example. This is my favorite tweet. Should I read it loud? I'm the 38th author. Wow, that sucks. I hadn't finished. I'm the 38th author called one. Oh. And here is the article. These are all author names. These are one of those hyper-authored articles. If you do your research, something like in high-energy physics or human genome, you have lots of author names listed in one paper, right? And this is actually not the end of the author list. This is only up to A to B, so there are long lists after this, right? And toward the end of the author list, yes, you have 38 ones. Yay! And 4 of them actually are 1C. Yeah, how to handle this kind of information, right? Yeah, but this is a reality today in scholarly communication, right? And we need to do something about this. And luckily, if you use ORCID, yes, there is a solution, right? All right. So these authors, if they choose so, they can start using ORCID and recognize this article as their work. Yeah, they can link to their ORCID record and identify this is me and this is my article. And one of 1C actually did that. So at least one of 4 1Cs, we are certain about it. He is from Shanghai Institute of Biological Sciences. Yeah. And I said persistent identifiers need to be actionable, right? So you can take an action on it. You click on this, and what happens is, in this database, you can retrieve all of ORCID's articles because he identified them, right? So there's a list of 69 articles, below this nice graph, generated by the database automatically. And you can also click on this button, and then what happens is you are taken to his authoritative ORCID record that he created. Yeah. And there you can find 86 articles, which is more than 69 articles that you found in the database, right? So some databases covers, a part of his publications, but you can find not all of them, but you can come to his ORCID record to find everything, because this is managed by him, the researcher himself. Yeah. So this is ORCID in a nutshell. Researcher control, it's persistent, and it's community driven. And how this can be community driven is there are more than 3.2 million researchers already using this ID, and we have more than 650 member organizations supporting our activities, and more importantly, supporting their researchers in their institution, right? There are more than 300 services enabling this kind of ORCID services, and there are more than 200 in the pipeline. So we are changing the game by giving researchers an ID and also making it actionable digitally and giving them the control to identify themselves and their contributions in academia. Okay. This is my ORCID record, and you can see my name, my ID, and my Japanese name, and my links to other identifiers, where I graduated from, where I worked, and the list of my publications. All of this I can manage myself. This is number one principle of ORCID, but if you look closely, each item actually has a privacy option. I tend to keep everything publicly available because I'm the ORCID person. Yeah, but you don't have to show everything publicly. In fact, I noticed you, Kaz, have not disclosed. Yeah, so you can search Kaz's name on the ORCID registry, and this is actually the first speaker tonight. Yeah, and if you click on it, you can find nothing because he's not showing it, right? But this is how he wants to be shy about himself, right? And that's fine. The important thing is that you have the control. So if you'd like to keep your record public, then you can do so. If you want to keep them private, you can do so. There's something in between. This is something interesting for you. You can keep your information from the public, but you can give explicit permission to some organization you can trust, like your university, like the publisher, publishing your recent research article, or anyone that you trust. You give the permission so that this organization can look at your record and also add your activities to your ORCID record, right? Okay. So how they can help you manage your record. If somebody works for the University of Colorado Boulder, you can say, I am employed by this university. In which case, the source of this information is going to be your name, because you are the one saying that I work for this university. But in this example, the source said, Faculty Affairs at the University of Colorado Boulder. That means it is the university saying that, yes, this researcher works for this organization. So it's the same information, this researcher works for this university, but the source of the information is actually very different. If the researcher says, I work for this organization, or the university says, he works for this organization, there is a different level of trust of the information. So that's what we enable through ORCID platform. Okay. So I already talked about the university affiliation added by the university, right? And what about the funding agencies? You apply for a funding and then give them the permission to add your activity, which is like receiving the funding. You know? Then they can say, we gave money to this researcher, and this is us saying, you know, and it is most trustworthy because it's where the money is coming from. Or you can give the permission to the publisher, so the publisher can say, this researcher kindly peer-reviewed our journal article. Yeah. So they can actually help to add your recent activities to your ORCID record once you give the permission to. So the ORCID member organizations have to be the trusted partner of the researcher they engage with, right? But using ORCID, these are all possible. Yeah. So how you give the permission to these ORCID member organizations? It is digital, so you log in with your password, so you know no one else would give your permission to somebody else, but only you. Yeah, you use your ID and password to log into your account and give the permission to those organizations, right? So how these are working in real life? I have a bunch of examples from here. Okay, so this is one of those research articles, right? And you would see sometimes this green icon popping up, right? And this shows that these authors are using ORCID ID. Toward the end of the article, they also show the names and ORCID identifiers hyperlinked. Clicking either this or these icons would resolve into author's ORCID record. Again, this author tends to show his record publicly, but in clicking and arriving this record, you may see that the records hidden from the public. But it is the researcher's choice, and you cannot control, but the researcher himself would control, right? And also, the traditional problem in publishing, in terms of identification, was that it was always happening at the very end of the publication process. We are changing that to bring up front for researchers to submit their manuscript to publishers along with their ORCID ID. So let them say, this is my work and this is my ID. Yeah. So ID travels through the scholarly communication process. The publisher accepts the paper along with the author's ID, and it is deposited to Crossref. This is the organization that gives the article identifier to your article. And they will pick up your author ID. Oh, hey, this article is written by you. Is it okay to post your new article to your ORCID record? And then you give the permission to Crossref, and they will do that for yourself, for your ORCID record. That means you no longer have to manage your publication list. Once you get the ORCID ID, give the permission to Crossref, as long as your article is getting a DOI, then they will update your publication list. Who thinks this is nice? Thank you. I'd like to give everyone the bag, but the number of bags are limited, sorry. Right, okay. So this is the kind of email that you receive from Crossref. Hey, you just published this new article, right? Okay. And do you like to give us the permission so we can update your record? Yeah, and you permission, and then it's going to be updated. A bunch of publishers are now starting to use ORCID, and some of them are even mandating. These are the publishers that's starting to require the ORCID. That means you have to have an ORCID if you'd like to publish in these publishers, right? Okay. And they are also updating the peer review activity to your ORCID record. Yeah. Peer review is an under-recognized part of researcher activity, and it is nice to be recognized on ORCID, right? Okay, thanks for the big nod, yes. Right, and also funders. As I said, the funding organization can recognize that it is you receiving the money from the funders, right? And it can be like a public record of you're getting the grants, right? Okay, and the National Institute of Material Science, this is in Japan, started using ORCID to researchers to synchronize their institutional repository and their ORCID record, so they can just visit their interface, then ORCID record can be synced. So there's no two places to manage, but just one, right? And this is an example from Saudi Arabia. So this is happening around the world with more than 650 organizations, right? And national level efforts are underway, right? One of them, Italy, more than 80% of Italian researchers now have ORCID, right? Because this is a national initiative, right? And also, how does this relate to open science anyways? Because it is an open registry, you can decide if you are going to make your record publicly available, or you connect with your other profiles and so on, so it can be nicely managed in one place, but all updated automatically. This is my Science Open account, right? So, ORCID aligns with FAIR guideline principle that Kaz talked about earlier. It's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So, if you could get an ORCID and start using it with your trusted organizations, you can enjoy, enter once, and reuse often the information about yourself and your work. All right. If you could get one for yourself, if you haven't yet, that would be great. To recap, it's free to register if you're a researcher. It can travel with you lifelong. It's a digital identifier wherever you go, and it is up to you to decide who to use it and who to access to your record. And it is a one place to manage multiple sources of information. That's all for me. Thank you so much.